Is Andrew Berry going to be aggressive this offseason? Now, this has been a whole conversation. I don't know what their cap situation is going to be like. There's a lot of us who are anticipating some restructures to happen. It seems like the Desha Watson restructure, right? Like that's something that's probably going to happen whenever Lamar's situation gets locked in. Is what I've been hearing is like the whole hold up with that, but that's very circumstantial. And I don't even know if that part of it is true or maybe if they're just waiting for something else. But even then, will the Browns have the cap space to do stuff? History tells me that, hey, if you want cap space, you can get cap space. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're releasing players. Like we panic about the cap all the time. And the cap is just one of those things where, yeah, it matters and it does affect some things, but it never really affects things like you think it's going to affect. Like, it's not that big of a deal if you're up against the cap. And the reason I say this is because I spent 3 years at the beginning of my career panicking about the cap situations of Philadelphia and the Saints, and there's been no consequence. It's been, like, the Eagles have gotten really good, and they were in a horrible cap situation like 2 years ago. The cap stuff just, it's there, but I don't think it's something that prohibits people from being aggressive if they want to be aggressive. It's an excuse for why you're not aggressive. But ultimately, if you want to be aggressive, there are ways to figure things out in the cap. And one of the things that's come out over the Combine weekend, and this is from a reporter, Jared Mueller. You know, he's not reporting this. He's just telling us what he's hearing on the ground at the Combine. He's been doing this for a very long time. Please give him a follow. And the link for his article will be in the description down below. But he wrote here, the NFL Combine, what I'm hearing in the first 2 days. And basically, the gist behind this is that Andrew Berry seems to be aggressive. And we know Andrew Berry to be aggressive. He's probably the most aggressive GM that we've had in Cleveland. Now, he's not super aggressive in the draft, even though he did trade up for JOK. But where Andrew Berry is probably his most aggressive self is in free agency and in the trade market, because he has signed a lot of free agents and he has traded for a lot of players, right? Amari Cooper comes to mind. I mean, Deshaun Watson might be one of the most aggressive moves in Cleveland Browns history. He's the dude who pulled the trigger on this. So, you know, he is probably one of the more aggressive GMs out there. And it seems like that's not changing because of the perceived cap situation that the Cleveland Browns are in, which, by the way, I would love to point out that the Kansas City Chiefs did win the Super Bowl, and it's not like Pat Mahomes is cheap. They actually had to get rid of a player because of his cap situation. And guess what? It turns out when you have a really good quarterback, you tend to win more games. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? You know, all these people telling you the quarterback's too expensive, you can't win a Super Bowl with. They're very quiet about the fact that Pat Mahomes is very expensive and just won the Super Bowl. You notice how that hasn't been a thing? Like, if Jalen Hurts would have won that Super Bowl, people are like, see, you can't win unless you got a quarterback on a rookie deal or on a cheap deal. We're paying these quarterbacks. But then Pat Mahomes wins, and not a thing about quarterback contracts. I find that interesting. All the hand-wringing that the Browns have for having a quarterback that's getting paid, all the hand-wringing that any team that signs a quarterback gets for having a quarterback that gets paid. And it turns out the quarterbacks who get paid are pretty good at playing quarterback, and maybe that helps you win more. I don't know. But it turns out Pat Mahomes' contract did not stop Pat Mahomes from winning the Super Bowl. Who would have thought having a good quarterback? Yeah, man, that helps you. That helps you, right? But I'm pretty sure we'll find a way to make that not be what it is, which is what it is. That, we make too much about quarterback contracts and how much money they take up. And, oh, you're taking up too much of the cap. He's the quarterback. You have no chance to win unless you have a great quarterback. You need to pay a great quarterback. And that's just what it is. But anyways, back to the main point of this video, which is Andrew Berry is looking to get aggressive about this whole thing. And Jared does a good job of kind of just laying this out on what the combine is and what he gets from the combine. And he says the reality is the most important things happen behind closed doors at the combine with no cameras around. In some order, the following things that actually matter occur in Indianapolis, and very little of it ever becomes known to the public. Medical evaluations, interviews with teams, conversations between teams about trades. We know that. Conversations with agents about free agents. It's very important. It's not a mistake that like Derek Carr is pretty close to getting a new deal right after the combine. That's not a mistake. Lots and lots of talking at bars, restaurants, hallways between team employees, agents, and media. So basically what my man's saying is the combine is important. And people continue to like, you notice that people always go to the combine. These media people, they go there because you get a lot of information at the combine. Because people who work in the NFL are just like anybody else. They want to talk about work to somebody who's not at work, especially when they got a cool ass job. Right? I ain't gonna lie, like I talk to my friends about work, like you always want to vent about work. Whether you work at Amazon, whether you work at UPS, whether you work at FedEx, you always want to talk about work to somebody who ain't at your work or somebody who's kind of related to your work, but not. You always need to vent about work. And that's kind of what happens there, is that reporters kind of hear this stuff from employees that are like, yeah, man, this is what I'm hearing. And this is this. And this is where a lot of stuff comes out. This is why the offseason picks up after the combine. The free agent one is not technically allowed unless it's a free agent from a team's final roster last year that was played as a street free agent. So basically saying, hey, it's technically tampering, but we know like the tampering's only in there as a rule unless like you're being super egregious. For the Cleveland Browns with no first round pick, currently no cap space, the discussions are quite a bit different than they've had in the past. That doesn't mean that they are fruitless and pointless. Here is what I'm hearing on the ground at Indy. Important to note that I am not reporting anything, that Jared is not reporting anything as happening. But conversations with people, I've spent a decade here building relationships, give me access to an understanding of some conversations. So he's just telling you what the word on the street. That's the translation. That's the translation. All right. He is not telling you that this is happening, but he is telling you what the word on the streets are. Okay. That is it. That is it. And nothing more, nothing less. This is the word on the street. GM Andrew Berry is considered aggressive in every conversation. This is the word around town. He wants things to happen and pushes to make things happen. The second thing, the Jesse Bates rumor is real, but Bates is hoping for a contract that blows people away. I find that interesting because I don't know if Jesse Bates gets a big contract, because I don't think my opinion of Jesse Bates, which is not the most positive opinion, I think he's a bit overrated as a free safety. And I don't think he's the true ball hawking free safety that people think he is. I think he relies on a lot of things that makes him easy to beat in certain systems. And that's why the Browns have always had success against Jesse Bates, because if you can misdirect Jesse Bates, which is not very hard to do because he follows the eyes a lot, you can not have to worry about Jesse Bates that much. And I think that's going to bring down his price. That's why Cincinnati didn't want to pay him. That's why he's in the free agency market to begin with. They drafted Dax Hill. Like, there's a reason he's available. And I think his price tag is not going to be as high as he wants because I think he sees himself as a premier top flight free safety. And I think everybody else sees him as better than average B-level free safety. You know, he's not a superstar, but he's good. And he could be better, but I don't think he's a superstar at the position. And I think the perception of Jessie Bates by some is that he's a superstar. I don't think that's the perception of him within league offices. And it's certainly not the perception of him with me. Barry will make cat space when he needs to and is willing to kick the can down the road as long as necessary. Basically saying they're in win now mode. Veterans, either free agents or potential trade targets, are excited about playing with Desha Watson, Myles Garrett, and Nick Chubb, and are impressed by the addition of Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone. So the perception matches how we felt here in Cleveland, that they knocked it out the park with those two coordinator hires. And then once you sober up and realize that the Browns do have Deshaun Watson, they do have Myles Garrett, and they do have Nick Chubb, they made some good hires in the offseason. This looks like one of those teams that's primed to go from worst to first. Head coach Kevin Stefanski is thought highly around the league by agents and players. Again, he's well respected. Tight end, despite the expectation of more 11 formulas, is expected to be addressed. It's not good for Harrison Bryant. Let me tell you, that sentence right there, that little sentence, that's not good for Harrison Bryant because David Njoku's not going anywhere. Hayden Hurst and Foster Moreau are two names that have been mentioned as Cleveland targets. Ooh, that's really not good for Harrison Bryant. Oh, these two sentences are a disaster for Harrison Bryant. The Browns believe that Schwartz can fix defensive line issues. Jim Schwartz, not Anthony Schwartz. Jim Schwartz can fix defensive line issues as much or more as new players. I thought this was a possibility. I didn't think they would I think they're going to add a player or two at the defensive line, but I think they're going to rely on coaching to be the fix, as they felt like that was the issue last year. Interesting. The team, like most, loves the current class of defensive linemen. Barry's had talks about adding picks in 2024, including a 2023 pick for a 2024 pick and a player type deal. He's talked about adding picks in 2024, next year's draft, including a 2023 pick for a 2024 and a player next year. As much as I disagree with the ideal of trading my second round pick or the Browns' second round pick this year, the only way I can agree to it or think that or get on board with it, I guess, is in that kind of a scenario, right? Where you're trading a second round pick and hopefully you're getting a really good player back, and then you're probably getting like a third round pick next year. Bird in hand, though. Like that, my whole issue with the draft is like I think we take too much value into taking shots at the board, and it's just like, just give me good players on the roster. Take your shots where you can take them, but I just want good players. Bird in hand. I'm tired of taking potential. This team's been running off potential for like 23 years, and I hate the experience. I would love to just get some birds in hand. Good players. I want good players right now. And the whole potential thing, we've been trying to get good players that way. It just hasn't worked. I've lost my patience with that strategy, to be honest with you. There is concern amongst some agent that Watson's contract could make it more difficult for them to get their vets traded to Cleveland. So I don't know how those two things are related. I would love to know more about that. And the general belief is that this year's draft lacks depth at the top of the draft. Said in a different way, pick 10 and pick 60 will have similar values to most teams and analysts, not the same, but similar. Trading down will be the goal of a lot of teams. Veterans Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham would be interested to join the Schwartz, depending on how things go with Philadelphia. Cox is more likely to be free than Graham. So That is the word on the street about Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns. They're going to be aggressive. They're probably not going to make a ton of picks in this year's draft. And they're going to be more focused on mid-March than late April. Makes sense given where they're at. Let's be honest here. The Browns, as much as we love the draft, the Browns have enough talent, enough young talent. They need to have players who can step up and start in certain spots, right? A defensive tackle, a free safety, a tight end. Not necessarily like you want to draft and project. We don't have 2-3 years. We got right now. And this team needs to be good right now. Like the days of going 500 or a game over 500 and being happy about the future of the team because of that, those are over. We signed Desha Watson. Like, we're not trying to go 500 or 9-8. I guess it's still hard for me to adjust to the extra game, but we're not trying to go 9-8 no more. This team needs to be in the playoffs. This team needs to be a fixture in that conversation. This team needs to get to an AFC championship game within the next 5 years. And they would hopefully get to a Super Bowl and win one within the next 5 years. We have not been moving like a team that is not trying to win now. Everything this team has done for the last 2 years especially has been moves to win now. And the window is now. Can't waste more time. Nick Chubb's not getting any younger. Myles Garrett's not getting any younger. Desha Watson not getting any younger. The window's now. Like, I cannot stress enough how little time there is to mess around and draft players to fill important roles that you don't know are going to be good in year one. Like, you got to take the bird in hand at this point. Versus, whatever the eggs, or I butchered that analogy, but you get what I'm saying. The potential is not as important as the promise, and we need promise right now. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts. And again, I know people are going to be mad about like the potential versus promise thing, but I would just offer this. Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, and Desha Watson. There's enough potential between the three of them to get you to the Super Bowl off that. You need some guys in between. We got enough potential on the team. We can talk about JOK's potential, Denzel Ward's potential, Greg Newsome's potential. We got all the potential in the world on this team. We don't need more potential. We just need good players, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good one.